The House will come to order. Prayer by the chaplain.
As we begin the work of this session today, we take pause to say thank you. Thank you, Almighty One, for the creation we live in, the state we call home, and the people who entrust us to do the good work of this community we call Minnesota. Thank you for opportunities to repair that which is broken and enhance that which is promising. Thank you for colleagues who care about the well-being of our citizens and work for the welfare of all Minnesotans without exception. As we begin the work of this session today, we take pause to ask for your guidance. Lead us, Holy One, toward decisions that reveal love and kindness instead of enmity and division. Direct us to loosen the bindings of oppression and to seek justice in our dealings with one another. Allow us to recognize holy possibilities and empower one another as ambassadors of sacred tasks that directly and indirectly press upon or release your children. As we begin the work of this session today, we take pause to ask for reminders. Eternal One, recall us to our duty to love our neighbors as ourselves. Help us to remember that you have a dream for our state and your creation that simply escapes our wildest imaginations. Humble us so that we are able to work through the minutiae of detailed legislation in order to better reflect your vision of our life here on earth. O gracious and merciful One, may all that is discussed and completed this day be done in ways that bring honor and praise to your name. Amen.
The chaplain for today is Reverend Brenda Freusland, Bethel Evangelical Lutheran Church, Minneapolis, Minnesota. Pledge of Allegiance. Please remain standing while we recite the pledges of allegiance to the flag of the United States of America. The clerk will take the roll. The clerk will close the roll. A quorum is present. The clerk will read the journal of the preceding day.
Journal of the House, 88th session, 2013, 30th day, St. Paul, Minnesota, Tuesday, April 2nd, 2013.
If there's no objection, further reading of the journal will be dispensed with and the journal approved as corrected by the chief clerk. Hearing no objection, the journal is approved as corrected by the chief clerk. Reports of standing committees and divisions. A copy of this order of business has been placed on each member's desk. If there's no objection, the reports will be adopted. Hearing no objection, the reports are adopted. Second reading of House files.
Second reading, House File 316.
Second reading.
Second reading, House File 681.
Second reading.
They got turned around up there.
Introduction of bills. The following House files have been offered for introduction today. The Chief Clerk will report the House files and give them their first reading.
Introduction and first reading of House File 1686 through 1719.
First reading, House Files 1686 to 1719. Messages from the Senate.
Message from the Senate. Mr. Speaker, I hereby announce the passage by the Senate of the following Senate files herewith transmitted. Senate File 166, 319, 521, and 716. Signed, Joanne M. Zoff, Secretary of the Senate.
First reading of Senate files.
Introduction and first reading of Senate File 166, an act relating to medical services. Schoen moves that Senate File 166 and House File 201, now on the calendar for today, be referred to the Chief Clerk for comparison. They bring no objections to it. Yeah, that's the motion.
There being no objection, so ordered.
Introduction and first reading of House File 319, an act relating to military affairs. Earhart moves that Senate File 319, House File 525, now in the General Register, be referred to the Chief Clerk for comparison.
There being no objection, so ordered.
Introduction and first reading of Senate File 521, an act relating to energy. Moline moves that House File 521 and Senate File 521 and House File 623, now in the General Register, be referred to the Chief Clerk for comparison.
Hearing no objection, so ordered.
Introduction and first reading of Senate File 716, an act relating to energy. Anderson S. moves that Senate File 716, House File 1205, now in the General Register, be referred to the Chief Clerk for comparison.
Hearing no objection, so ordered. Calendar for the day. The first bill on the calendar for the day is House File 164. The clerk will report the bill.
House File 164, number 4 on the calendar for the day, an act relating to health. This is the first engrossment.
I recognize the author, Representative Norton, who will explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. It's my pleasure to bring before you today House File 164, the Radiation Therapy Facility Constructions Bill. It's not a new bill to most of us here. In fact, it's kind of become a perennial favorite. I hope to change that today with this bill. This bill extends the expiration of the existing moratorium of radiation therapy facilities and extends the distance between facilities from 7 miles to 15 miles. The reason we're bringing this bill forward is because healthcare costs are important to Minnesotans, to all Minnesotans. Duplication and oversupply of expensive technology drives up healthcare costs. All of the population in the metro area lives within 15 miles of 1, 2, or 3 existing radiation facilities. So the extension in this bill works for patients and protects their care. Allowing more radiation therapy facilities to be built merely transfers patients from one facility to another and potentially serves to deplete patient load and revenue from current facilities. While this particular bill prevents new standalone facilities from being built, existing facilities are entitled and allowed to upgrade their technology and add additional linear accelerators. Rather than building new facilities, it makes far more sense to have facilities extend their operating hours, bring in new technology, and to maintain the most up-to-date treatment for their patients. A representative cross-section of facilities from 2000 to 2010 shows virtually no growth in the number of patients and treatment needed. And this is a good thing because these machines are used to treat cancer. In the 11 radiation therapy facilities that I'm aware of, no patient is having to wait for treatment. And in fact, Many of you remember that in committee, I was asked to not bring this bill forward until the study that last year's legislative session had requested, and with leadership's permission, we chose not to bring a bill forward until that research study was done. And it was done, and it supports the bill that I'm bringing forward today. There is no need until long past 2022 for new facilities to be built, and we know that there is plenty of care out there. So, members, I want to let you know that there are several other hospitals that have already added new linear accelerator treatment treatment machines, and Mercy Hospital is adding a second linear accelerator in 2014. We have plenty of capacity to serve the patients in need in our state. So with that, Mr. Speaker, I'm just very pleased to be able to say that we are going to put this bill before the body, hopefully vote it out, and not have to bring this back year after year. We have the capacity, and we treat our patients quite well in the state of Minnesota, and we'll do so long into the future with your support.
There are amendments at the desk. Clerk will report the First Amendment. And members, the language of the amendment is on its way out right now.
Dean moving to amend House File 164. The first engrossment as follows. The amendment is coded A13-0371.
Representative Dean.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I don't believe the members have the amendment yet at their desks.
So the amendment is being distributed. If you want to describe the amendment, all four amendments are on their way out, I think. So.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. First of all, I'd like to request a roll call.
Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. Members, this bill deals with the moratorium on radiation oncology for cancer patients across the state of Minnesota. It affects cancer patients, greatly throughout the state of Minnesota. It affects cancer patients in a very, very significant way. Access to cancer treatment is a very, very important piece of our healthcare system, and this bill has had a history back and forth, going back to 2002 with moratoriums and extensions. And for folks that have been around for a while, this is not new material, but for a lot of the freshmen, this is new material. And for folks getting up to speed on it, it basically deals with how we regulate the ability of cancer patients to access care throughout the state of Minnesota. And some of the key points to keep in mind are that particularly in areas like my part of northeast metro area, in areas like Woodbury and in the north metro, access has been a continual issue where we have a growing population and unfortunately increasing incidence of cancer. The good news is that our treatments are getting better, our recovery rates are getting better, and the skilled physicians and clinicians that do that care do an awesome job. But we in the state of Minnesota have been regulating the ability of cancer patients to access that care. And last year, we had an agreement that we thought was going to be an agreement that would last for a long time, but we see that it has not even lasted 12 months. Both of the sides both of the major stakeholders in this agreement had come to an agreement. Both sides came to this agreement. The members of the House also were up to speed on this and became aware of this agreement, and in fact was brought to the House floor, and a vote was taken on that agreement, and the result of that vote was 132-1. 132-1 in vote in favor of the agreement. And now we see that in just less than a year that agreement is not longer valid, and we see we're walking away from that. I think that's a very dangerous precedent when we ask folks from outside to come to the Capitol to make concessions, to make difficult concessions, to shake hands, make an agreement, bring it to the House floor, and see everybody in this chamber but one person vote for that agreement, and then within one calendar year to come back, and here we are again renegotiating that. So what this amendment does, members, is this says that if that agreement is no longer valid, then the moratorium is no longer valid, and that is the essence of this amendment. It is not one that was agreed to by both sides, certainly, but it certainly acknowledges the fact that last year we have an agreement and this year we do not have an agreement. I believe that as a person who represents people in my district, 100% of the people who access this care has cancer. And we're asking them to drive farther and to wait longer and to go through more steps. And if you're going through chemotherapy, if you're going through radiation, if you're going through that long road that many of us in this chamber have gone through, or our families or our loved ones, we know what that's like. I believe that this puts a greater hardship on cancer patients across the state of Minnesota. What this amendment does is it says that if we do not have an agreement, then we do not have a moratorium. I'd appreciate your support on this amendment, and I'd be happy to entertain any questions, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Norton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. Well, this amendment unfortunately defeats the purpose of the bill. If this amendment were adopted, there would be no moratorium and there would be no 7 and then 15-mile prohibition, as my bill is trying to do. This amendment ignores the results of the very health department study, which I have in my hand, which is not maybe allowed, which I have in my hand, and I have read every page of the document. Members, the document that our department did is quite thorough and quite explicit and quite clear. Patients aren't having to wait to go to a cancer radiation treatment facility within a 15-mile radius of their home. They simply aren't. There is plenty of capacity. This particular amendment undoes what we're trying to do here. If you want the cost of health care to go up, then maybe you want to vote for Representative Dean's amendment. If you like cross-subsidies, maybe you want to vote for Representative Dean's amendment, because hospitals will continue to lose centers that drive with these self-referral driven facilities that are in competition with our heavily regulated hospitals. I'm asking you to please vote no on the Dean amendment and support this bill.
Representative Hamilton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I was the author of the bill last year, and I don't want to get into the debate on the process or the outcome either. I would simply like to thank Representative Norton for bringing this forward. And the argument about having access to care, and you take a look about the number of facilities that are located here in the metro area. And of course, we want to be very empathetic and to the individuals going through the cancer treatments. In 2007, I went through chemo, and I drove 2.5 hours for my treatment. 2.5 hours. When we live out in greater Minnesota, sometimes we don't have access that we have here. And when we're debating these hospitals and the cancer treatments in the cities, I've got the mileage here, and we're looking at about anywhere from 13 to 19 minutes, depending on where you're located. But again, 2.5 hours I drove in 2007 for my chemo treatments. I went through chemo. That wasn't for cancer; it was for multiple sclerosis, but it was chemo nonetheless. And so again, I'm not going to get in the argument about carrying the bill last year and the outcome. I simply want to thank the author for this today. Thank you.
Representative Dean.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. I'd like to highlight the study that Representative Norton brought up, because I think it's instructive in what that study said. We asked the department, as we often do, to come up with studies and look at capacities. They talked to the hospitals and they said, what is the capacity and what is your outlook? What that study, when I look at the data within that study, it says that we're going to have a 23.5% increase in cancer cases in the next 10 years and a 23.9% increase in the need for radiation therapy systems. That says to me that we're going to need more delivery in the next 10 years. We're going to increase the amount of cases by 25% in the state of Minnesota. We're going to have a quarter more. So what we're saying is, well, we can just have an extra shift. Just stay open a little later. Just stay open a little later, hospital. Just come back on the third shift, cancer patient, because we can't fit you in right now. Members, cancer patients really are going through some tough times. We shouldn't pick them out as the one patient class that we're going to say, we're going to limit the amount of care that you're going to get. We're going to limit the way that you get chemotherapy or radiation therapy. We're going to say when you can do that, because we're going to limit where and when you can get that care. I don't know of really too many other areas that we do this in, and I understand that there's some good reasons that came about. But our cancer patients shouldn't be told, you know, we'll leave the light on for you, come back later. Cancer patients are going through a tough time. They need more choices, not less. The study that Representative Norton brought up itself, if you read the study, and I hope you have, it says that we're going to need a quarter more capacity in the next 10 years. So I hope we all have read that study.
Representative Norton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And it's not good always to cherry pick facts out of a report, which I believe just happened, because if you do read the report, and I do hope people have done so, you will find that statewide by 2022 we will only reach 75% capacity using the current and in progress facilities that are underway right now, 86% in the Twin Cities and 83% in West Central Minnesota. And I want to mention that's on the current 8 to 5 schedule. If we do extend hours, as Representative Dean was implying, we actually get to a 77% Twin Cities capacity and only 67% statewide. So there's plenty of capacity. There's no need for this amendment, and I thank you very much.
Representative Zellers.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, I rise in support of the Dean amendment for many of the reasons that Representative Dean brought up, and more importantly to the point that, and I'll have an amendment for later on if Representative Dean's amendment doesn't pass, to say a deal's a deal. And just because you switch majority, just because you've got an opportunity now, because you've got all branches of government to go back on a deal, doesn't make it right. The cost savings, supposed cost savings, in this study are all based on self-reported facts. This isn't as if we went in with a forensic analysis and looked through each and every transaction. This is self-reported data. Now, I'll take all the facilitators at their word that they reported accurately, but it's still self-reported data. And if we're going to go down this, and for those of you who haven't been a part of this wonderful debate for the last 10 years like many of us, this is the only area that we do this. It's also one of, I think, only one state or a couple of states in the country that does this. Now, if it's such a great idea, if it's such a fascinating cost-saving measure, then why hasn't Massachusetts done it? Why isn't California? Why haven't these high-populous states with a lot more sick people than we have here in Minnesota? We're one of the healthiest states in the country. Why haven't they adopted this brilliant idea? Because that's not what it's about. And to my friends from Greater Minnesota, we appreciate your concern about our treatment centers here in the metropolitan area, but if you read the bill, you're exempt. You're not included. So if your hospital has told you that on their behalf you've got to come down here and vote in favor of this extension of a moratorium because it's the right thing to do, it's going to save cost savings, no offense, but you're not involved. It's those of us right here in the metropolitan area. The further point is, if we're going to do this with cancer treatment, then why not dialysis? Then why not diabetes treatment? We have a burgeoning industry in diabetes when it comes to overweight, so obesity and treating obesity. Why not limit then how many of these facilities? My hospital, Maple Grove, has a dialysis center that came up just across the street from it. Why not limit the ability to expand dialysis in the state of Minnesota? The moratorium on its face doesn't make sense, members. There's a letter being handed out here on the House floor about the constitutionality of the bill and actually extending the constitutionality, making it even more unlikely that this law will hold up. But then also the Commerce Clause. So Representative Dean has the position that I prefer, and again, I'll have my amendment if Representative Dean's doesn't prevail that says a deal is a deal. I would have preferred his version of it, but I agreed to a lot of things that I didn't like in the last version of the bill, the compromise that we came to. Agreed to take some of the things that I thought were important, set them aside for a compromise that got, I think it was all but one vote here on the House floor. So we compromised in the sense that each side gave a little bit in order to have something passed. And now, just a few short months later, a year later, we're going to go back on that deal, throw it out, and say, no, 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 what we did in the past, the people who worked on this in the past, your work is irrelevant. Sorry, thanks, but no thanks. We're going to cut ourselves a new deal, and we're going to go back on that compromise. Members, that's not right. If you do it now on this, careful what happens later on down the road. As we all can see, majorities come and majorities go. Careful what happens here today, because the same thing could happen to you on your bill, on your piece in the valley later on. And peace in the valley doesn't mean that after your piece of the valley has been settled, you stab the other guy in the back. Members, please support the Dean Amendment. If you want to have a true conversation about it, I'll offer my amendment, but I suggest the fair and the best way is to support the Dean Amendment.
Representative Abler.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. I was going to wait till later, and then everybody's standing up, so maybe I'll make my comments on this bill early. This has been a project under discussion since I think I was a freshman. And I warned people at the time that this will come back, and you will see this bill again. And I predict you'll see this bill again even after today. It seems to be the gift that keeps on giving. But I think we should see this bill again when it's the right time to see it again. If you read the report, and it's a really good report, and it goes into some detail, it says there's adequate capacity till 2022. Now, the Department of Health, I don't always agree with how they go about their work, but they don't really have an interest in this topic either way. They just want to know, how much do we need? And we've had studies, we've had task forces, and now the Department of Health comes out with an authoritative conclusion, at least for now, that there's sufficient capacity till 2022. And so that works for me. There is no lack of capacity, and they're not even full all the time. And people don't have to go to the clinic at midnight, and if that was the case, I'd be on the different side of this bill and suggest we build more of these things. But there is something else called the medical arms race, which is where we spend a lot of money buying things that really don't need, and actually costs go up and not down. And that's the problem with a lot of this stuff. I suggest that we vote for the bill clean the way it is and let this thing go till 2020. And then in 2018, those of you who are here then, you can discuss this again. Do we need more or not? But there is something that I recall with former Representative Abrams, and he chided me soundly as he sat in that chair down there, and I was sitting somewhere around here, and I pointed out the Texas study that said that people who own or have ownership interests in radiation facilities tend to send people more often to those places. And I didn't write the study, I just read it, but I found it persuasive that Texas itself had done some research by their departments to decide if it was indeed true or not. And I found it disappointing, and Representative Abrams chided me pretty seriously like I'd written the report, but I didn't write it. And so, and I don't want to argue that point, but it seems like there's some validity to that. And so it seems leaving these facilities tied to a hospital where they're involved in community benefit and service is a good idea. There'll be a number of amendments coming, and I know they're all well intended, but I think the bill, just the way it is the way it should go, Mr. Speaker, and I would urge a no vote on this amendment and the rest, and I thank you for your attention.
Representative Norton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. I just wanted to address the handout that you received on your desk. I have a counter handout. As we know, attorneys are pretty good about disagreeing with each other. I didn't hand it out because it's a 5-page letter, but the gist of the letter is that the statute is presumed constitutional, the bill does not violate the Commerce Clause, and the bill does not violate equal protection or due process rights. And so I'm not going to hand that out, but it is a letter from a legal firm similar to the one that you have with a very very different opinion. The other point I did want to just touch on was the fact that no other state has a moratorium, and that is true. What I will tell you, though, is 27 states have a requirement for a certificate of need for any standalone or private radiation therapy center to be built. So they're handling it differently in 27 states than we do here in Minnesota. We have used a moratorium. It's worked well, and I think we're going to continue it. Sometime into the future, but as Representative Abler said, sometime in 2017, hopefully the department will keep an eye on this, and we may need to extend the moratorium or remove it, depending on capacity at that time.
Seeing no further discussion, the clerk will take the roll on the amendment. The clerk will close the roll. Representative Lilly votes no. There being 30 ayes and 100 nays, the motion does not prevail. The amendment is not adopted. There is another amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Zeller is moving to amend House File 164, the first engrossment as follows. The amendment is coded A13 382.
Representative Zellers.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, may I have a roll call?
Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I actually have an oral amendment. There's an amendment coming later on here that is going to take out part of mine. So I'd like to have an oral amendment. Just delete line 1.2, Mr. Speaker.
I'm sorry, Representative.
That's all right, Mr. Speaker. I just wanted to delete line 1.2. Representative Kiefer has the same amendment coming forward later on. It's already been handed out.
Okay, so Representative
He's just deleted.
Representative Zellers wants to modify his amendment by deleting
line 1.2, Mr. Speaker.
And I only just take a pause. I don't see that language in Representative Kiefer's amendment, but maybe I'm missing something.
In her amendment?
It relates to the Woodbury facility, Mr. Speaker.
Okay. I'm sorry. Yeah. All right. So Representative Zellers modifies his amendment. Oh, well, the clerk will report the modification.
Zellers is modifying his amendment 382 as follows. Delete line 1.2.
All right. Representative Zellers to your modified amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, members. Members, you've already heard the discussion about what we went through last year and the 130-some votes to 1 on the bill. And, this has been, so far the discussion has been about numbers, how much capacity we have, how much ability we have going forward, how long it's going to take to get to that full capacity. The cancer pre-treatment patients have to come in at 1 or 2 in the morning because that's when we need to run the machines. I'll tell you just a quick story about 2 cancer patients that I know. One of them, his name is Edith, and she was a one-room schoolhouse teacher that put herself through college teaching school during the Great Depression. She'd live off a quarter a week, silver dollar for the week and the weekend. Buy day-old bread, 5-day-old bananas, used everything that she could down to the last penny to put herself through college. Went on to teach in a one-room schoolhouse, went on to then teach second grade for more than 30 years. Just shortly after retiring, she had an unfortunate situation where she thought she tore a rotator cuff gardening. So she went in, did some physical therapy, it just didn't seem to quite getting better. And a good old doctor of 72 years decided, we should maybe do a real quick x-ray of your arm, see if you don't have a nerve damage or maybe a hairline fracture in there. Come to find out she had a baseball-sized tumor in her left arm. Rushed her down to the Mayo Clinic in Rochester, found out that it had spread into her liver. Now, Edith McMorrin, Edith as she was known, happened to also be referred to by me and my kids as Grandma Smurf. My grandmother passed away from liver cancer. Now, any of you who have gone through that or have a family friend or a relative that have gone through that, it's probably one of the ugliest forms of cancer because it basically starves the patient. The treatments actually get into the taste buds, nothing. Water, broth, nothing will taste good besides the pain of the treatment, and the cancer is usually starvation or a form of it going into it. My grandma had to travel almost 95 miles to get her treatment. Now, when she went in, she was a public school teacher, so she was a very outgoing and a very generous person. Taught me how to cook, taught me how to clean, how to sew. So if you need button sewed on the floor, I'm your guy. But she was probably one of the most giving people and only lasted 2.5 years after retirement before cancer took her. It wasn't something she liked to talk about. It wasn't something that she liked even people in her own church to hear about because she was a very private person. It was about her treatment, how she received that treatment, what made it most comfortable for her, where it made the most sense for her. She didn't have a choice. Like Representative Hamilton, she had one place to go about 90 miles away. So in this case, her case doesn't pertain necessarily to our bill when it comes to the miles and how much percentage, but it pertains to how she took her treatment. Now, our other patient, his name was Billy. Probably get the joke here. He was called Grandpa in our house. My grandpa lived to be the ripe old age of 92 years old. He survived prostate cancer 3 times. He had both hips replaced, one of them twice, had carpal tunnel in his hand, had 4 vertebrae in his neck fused together, a fake knee joint, and pins in his ankle. We called him the Bionic Smurf because he made Representative Rukavina look like Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. But my grandpa would go in for a procedure, and he didn't care if there was one person in the room or if they had the entire med school in there while he was having his treatment. Didn't matter to him. The more the merrier, gave him somebody to talk to. He'd probably get the family trait coming through here. His treatment wasn't the priority for him. It was surviving yet another bout of prostate cancer. And at age 90, I think he was 90 the last time he was diagnosed and treated, he was fine. It was about surviving it. It was about just getting the treatment. It wasn't about where he had it or when he had it. It was about getting the treatment, getting out the door, and getting back to cards and talking to the boys. And that's what this bill is about, members. You can wave a report around. You can have dueling lawyer statements. We'll find out about the constitutionality and the Commerce Clause because I would assume that once this thing is passed, there's going to be sued. I don't know. I'm not privy to any plans by any of the participants in this discussion. But we'll find out about that. But this isn't about numbers. It's about how Edith wanted to be treated and how Billy could care less. And that's what we're talking about here. We don't do it. Yes, Representative Norton is correct. There are limitations, certificate of need. We can get into the whole discussion about hospital moratorium, something that I've had an unfortunate experience with, that I think those are a bad idea too. But this is about where cancer treatment is given, how it is given to the patient, and that should be our focus. Because anybody can use math, anybody can use statistics, anybody can say we're close to capacity or we're going to be good in capacity for the next 10 years. As the baby boomers retire, anybody who can predict what they're going to need from their health care treatment accurately within 5 or 10%, take them up on it. Go ask them to buy them a lottery ticket because I think they're over-exaggerating. We don't know the depths and the breadth of the treatment that's going to be needed as these baby boomers retire because we haven't seen that in our country before. So members, my amendment isn't about the speech that I gave. This is about the deal that we had. But the essence of this bill is cancer treatment for patients, for our grandmas, our grandpas, our moms, our dads, our friends like Representative Hamilton, who have gone through this, who've had to suffer through this treatment, and it's where they are most comfortable in their most uncomfortable time. I think that should be our first and foremost function. Again, my amendment goes back to the deal that we had. And if you're willing to break the deal on this because you took the majority or because you're now in charge of this committee or that committee, then you shouldn't have made the deal in the first point. And I guess shame on me for agreeing to compromise some of the things that I felt strongly in hopes that we would actually keep the deal, keep the peace in the valley. Because all it's going to do is jade the process around here. Well, a deal's not really a deal. If we take back the majority, we'll just go in. And that happens around here. I'm not a Pollyanna that don't think that there's some things like that, once a deal's done, any legislature can change whatever comes next. But this is one of those issues, member, it's been going on for the decade I've been here, that if you're willing to do it on something this big, then careful what you vote for today, because it might be coming back to be visited on you. The amendment before you, members, just very simply takes the bill that we have before us today and goes back to the deal that was made. Being a member, being a voter of your word. There's many of you in here who voted against the Dean amendment, may or may not vote against my amendment. But are you a person of your word or are you not? I'd encourage a green vote on the amendment.
Representative Norton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, this isn't going back on a deal. This is a legislature leading. This is doing the work that we do here at the Capitol. And I want to remind several of the folks that just spoke that when I first came to the Capitol, it was actually one of the very first meetings and one of the first tours I had of this facility as a freshman legislator. And at that time, we had a deal. And then a new administration and new, parties change, leaders change, and another deal is made. This bill changes from year to year depending on who's in charge. We had a moratorium in place before. We've changed this bill again last year. This year, we've looked at the data and we see that we don't need to keep dealing with this bill year after year. We have the opportunity, due to facts and information, to say we don't have to do it anymore. We can just set a moratorium out, let the patients get the care they need from the wonderful facilities that are available in a timely manner, and keep an eye on it. When capacity changes, we'll address it at that time. But there is no need to go back to 2017 rather than 2020 and come back here in another year and do it again. So, members, I'd urge a no vote to this amendment.
Representative Mack.
Thank you, Speaker Thiessen. Members, I just wanted to stand up and just make a couple of points on this. Had the pleasure of hearing this bill over and over the past few years. And in the past, I have supported keeping the moratorium in place. I think there's a lot of sound arguments going forward for why that's necessary. But members, I have a lot of reservations about the bill in front of us as is. I think that a 7-year moratorium is far greater than anything we've done in the past. I don't think it's an appropriate way forward, especially with all of the looming questions we have in healthcare and how things are going to be changing with the federal changes that are being made. And I just want to point members to some information in the report that kind of gives credence to this. Yes, the report does talk about capacity. I would not say it's bulletproof. As I read it, there certainly are conclusions drawn, but I also think it begs a lot of questions. And in the report, it does say, considering the substantial uncertainties associated with conducting longer-term projections, and it goes on to talk about the uncertainties relating to the Affordable Care Act and the aging of the baby boomers, it suggests that the legislature should look at this much sooner than what is being proposed in this bill. It says that in the report, members. And so I think Representative Zeller's is a prudent way forward. I'm going to be voting for it, members, because it stands behind the agreement that I took last year when I voted in favor of what was put on the table. And I'm standing by that vote again today. In addition to that, members, this report gives me sounder ground to stand on, that 2020 is simply too long. This is too long of a moratorium. Technology changes very rapidly. There may be a whole new method of treatment for cancer 5 years from now, 6 years from now. That's a much better way forward for the people of this state. And I'm afraid that this locks us into something that's not responsible in our medical community. So, members, I ask you to support the Zeller's amendment. Thank you.
Representative Hamilton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. I would just respectfully caution people not to question motives, not to question people's word or anything like that. let's stick to the merits of the amendments in the bill before us, because I really don't want to have a food fight here on the House floor about how things were handled in the past. Thank you.
Representative Dean.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. I'd rise in strong support of the Zellers amendment. I think a deal is sometimes a deal, and I think legislators should sometimes lead, and I think your word should mean something. And I believe it's Representative Liebling voted no on the original amendment, and I respect that. And I was hoping that I could get her vote on my amendment since she had voted against the agreement, and I don't know whether or not she did vote for that. I didn't get the register to see whether or not she voted with me, but so my comments wouldn't be directed directly towards Representative Liebling because she did not support the agreement, or any of the freshmen whose names I'm almost up on, representatives on the other side of the aisle. I'm almost there. Isaacson and Simonson, but I'm getting there. So my comments wouldn't be directed there, but also directed to the legislators who voted for that agreement. And I think that sometimes agreements should last longer than the next election, and should last longer than the changes in tide. This is a very good thing for those who try to influence the legislature in one way or the other. Changes are good, and prevention of change is good for a lot of those folks. But for some of us, I think that particularly for those who give up a lot when they shake hands to make a deal, I think it should last a little bit longer, and we should think a little bit harder about this and about how it affects particularly cancer patients in the metro area. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Pepin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm wondering if Representative Norton would yield her question.
She will. Representative Pepin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative Norton, I'm not sure if you mentioned it or not. I'm sort of maybe one of the few people that are torn on this amendment, and I'm just wondering why 2020 was selected, why that's important date, and why that's better than 2017.
Representative Norton.
I don't have an answer to why 2020 was chosen, but I can tell you that the study shows that we could go out actually further than that to 2022 quite comfortably, knowing that there'd be 75% capacity. So there's no need to shorten it. If anything, we should be having amendments to stretch it out based on the report in front of us.
Representative Gruenhagen.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would Representative Norton yield for a question?
She will. Representative Gruenhagen.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Yeah, I've been on both sides of this issue. Unlike most of my principals, I pretty well know where I stand, but I actually fluctuated back and forth. But one of the things that has convinced me to support this amendment, and also Representative Dean's and Representative Huntley, or Chair Huntley, has been a big influence on me too, is a person handed me a copy of a law that states if they do build a cancer treatment center, it has to be connected to the hospital. So they can't just build a standalone cancer treatment. Would you agree with that?
Representative Norton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative Gruenhagen, I do believe that is the current law, but what has happened in the state of Minnesota, which was really unfortunate and kind of raised some eyebrows, was it was one of them in the state of Minnesota was built in conjunction with a hospital, but not near that hospital. In fact, it was built close to a competitor's hospital, and so was drawing patients away from a hospital in a different community. So we don't want to see that, but we do, in law, allow relationships with hospitals currently.
Representative Gruenhagen.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Representative Norton. Yeah, I'll agree that health care, with all the laws and government funding and regulations, isn't a true free market, okay? It's been pretty, depending on your perspective, corrupted from a free market standpoint. We'd be all better off if it had more free market principles. But I do think the idea that it has to open with another hospital, and that ultimately competition brings down cost, and it also increases innovation, are two good principles that I see going on here. And I guess that brings me to the point where I am going to support Representative Zeller's amendment, and hopefully we can shorten the moratorium time and be able to deal with this again down the road. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Zellers.
Oh, I'm sorry. I wasn't sure if Representative Gruenhagen asked me to yield. Oh, well, Mr. Speaker, and Representative Hamilton, to your point, I would not ever question the motives of a member, would not want to in any way impugn what Representative Norton is doing with her bill that affects our area, not hers. But this was a bill that we worked on. I compromised a significant amount on what I believe is the right thing for the residents of my area in the 7-county metro, the hospitals, the standalone facilities that are going to be operated in my area. Therefore, when that compromise was made, I believe that we should abide by that compromise. It's not as if it's a change in the LGA formula, which happens around here, as Representative Marquardt and Lincheski know, all too often. It's not a change in the school funding, as Representative Garofalo or Mariani will tell you. This is something that's been worked on for 10 years. There were some nibbles around the edges, Representative Norton, absolutely. But nothing this big that both sides, who were very dug in for a very long time, had come to a compromise on. Again, we can go back again to the dueling lawyer arguments. I'll sum it up for those of you who are in question. You can be on the side of free markets, the side of the Constitution and God if you want, or you can vote against my amendment. I'd appreciate your green vote.
Representative Murphy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. I'm listening to the debate and especially listening to the conversation about a deal. And, we make deals. I think about the Vikings, and we made a deal, and, well, we'll set that aside for now. Last year, there was a lot of work done on this in good faith, and there was a date set, but there was also a study commissioned. And we've seen the study, and the study shows us that we have excess capacity in this area. We're policymakers. We are policymakers, and while I understand there was a deal made last session, which I voted for, the study shows that we have plenty of capacity, and we should adjust our thinking based on that. And I think Representative Norton's bill is representing that thinking, that we don't need right now the proliferation of more building. And instead we have the capacity to meet the need of those patients in Minnesota that need cancer treatment. And that's why I think it is important that we listen to Representative Norton, that her bill is the right bill for Minnesota, and I would ask you to vote against the Zellers amendment.
Representative Zellers.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and Madam Majority Leader. That would be all well and fine if Representative Norton hadn't introduced her bill and passed her bill before the study came back. For those of you who aren't on any of the health committees, in fact, I wasn't there, but apparently we just said, well, studies come and go, we can just disregard them. The bill was introduced, the times, all the provisions were put into the bill before the study came out. And again, you know what? I hope you are right. I hope that there is all kinds of capacity, but God help you and the patients, our grandmas and grandpas, mothers, fathers, sister, brothers, if you're not right and somebody goes without treatment. I would rather err on the side of making sure that there's capacity, making sure that the technology keeps up with the need. This bill, I think, and just my personal opinion, it doesn't do that. It limits our ability in a way that are only doing for one area. We're not doing it for dialysis again. We're not doing it for diabetes treatment. We're not doing it for glaucoma treatment. But we are for cancer treatment. I think that's wrong. That's why but fully understanding, willing to go back and compromise, we did. That's what my amendment does. It takes us back to the compromise we had from last year. I'd appreciate your green vote on this.
Seeing no further discussion, the clerk will take the roll on the amendment. The clerk will close the roll. There being 42 ayes and 88 nays, the motion has not prevailed. The amendment is not adopted. There's another amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Kiefer moving to amend House File 164. The first engrossment as follows. The amendment is coded 386.
Representative Kiefer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. According to the agreement last year that we've already heard a lot about, it was a vote of 132 to 1. A lot of this stemmed around a specific case in Woodbury. And so there's a radiation bed in Maplewood that's going to be moved to Woodbury Woodwinds Hospital. This is an MRO machine. It's dealt through with MRO, so in case you're worried about that aspect of this bill, you won't be making anyone too angry. This is just keeping what was agreed upon last year. The amendment simply asks that we have insurance or be assured that the radiation bed will be up and running by August of 2014. And that was the original agreement. Woodwinds does not oppose this from what I hear. I also have a memo from their representative that says, quote, "We have every intention to bring radiation therapy to the Woodwinds campus by August 2014 and serve the needs of Woodbury and Washington County residents." This would be the only radiation bed in Washington County, so it's an important thing for our area. Representative Ward, Representative Schoen, this is real close to you. I hope that you could support this amendment. It's not really changing anything in Rep. Norton's bill except for this particular incident, and it's important that we bring this radiation bed to our area to help our patients in the area. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Norton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I'm going to ask folks to oppose this amendment. While I'm very sympathetic and understand the situation, it is incorrect to imply that Woodbury residents will not have access to radiation therapy. In fact, let me just let you know that Health East is committed to having their facility completed in 2014. I've confirmed that. The process takes time, and they couldn't begin until January 1st of this year in order to start that move because of last year's legislation and the timing on that. Construction is occurring, but there are, in the meantime, between now and when that facility opens, which is, again, in 2014, I did some checking because I wanted to make sure that the folks in Representative Kiefer's community weren't being shorted and didn't have to drive too far. I did do some checking, and there are 4 facilities that are within 13 miles radius, 7 miles, 8 miles, 12 miles, and 13 miles currently. So there are 4 current facilities for patients in that area to go to in the meantime until this facility is completed. So, members, there's no need for this, and I'm encouraging you to vote no.
Representative Schoen.
Thank you, Mr. There we go. Sorry. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would Representative Kiefer yield for a question?
She will yield. Representative Schoen.
Representative Kiefer, in your amendment, you give a sunset date that the project absolutely has to be committed or completed by. What I'm concerned about is unforeseen circumstances during the construction. So what happens via your amendment if it's 90% complete, but yet there's a tornado or some other type of natural disaster? Then what happens to the project, and are they then now not allowed to complete the project?
Representative Kiefer.
Mr. Speaker, this was brought up by Mary out in the hallway, but the original agreement is that they said we are ready to move and get this thing going. We're just asking for an assurance because currently, and I don't think this was the author's intent, was to give Woodwinds or MRO more time, and she can correct me if I'm wrong. I don't think that's the intent, but inadvertently, this project is rolled into the extension. So potentially, under this law, if it passes as is, we might not see that radiation bed move for 6 more years. And like you've already heard, this has been going on for 5 years already. So it's an important project. I just want to have some insurance that they don't kind of have an excuse, not that I think they would, but they could potentially be covered under this and not have to move the radiation bed for another 6 years.
Representative Schoen.
Mr. Speaker and Representative Kiefer, I actually agree with you on the merits of what you're trying to say because I want to see this completed too. However, my concern is I wish it would have been worded in a way that said that beginning of the construction had started on by a certain date rather than completion, at least to see that had gotten started. If you had, I think I would be supportive of that in that fashion.
Representative Kiefer.
Mr. Speaker, I forgot to ask for a roll call.
Roll call being requested. There's 15 hands. There will be a roll call. Representative Kiefer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Some of the language, I had a couple of different amendments. One of them did say something about construction should be started by December. And I thought that would actually be the kind of muddy, and I wanted to have it more concise. If we could, do you have a suggestion on how to change this very quickly on the floor that we could make this amendable to people?
Well, Mr. Speaker and Representative Kiefer, I don't. If it's inverse and if it's that they started on construction by a certain date, then I'm happy. I don't know that where the Representative Norton feels on any changes to the bill, and I don't even know that we can make that significant of a change under the rules or not. But that's where I wish your amendment would have gone, and if we can do that, then I'll be supportive.
Representative Norton.
Members, I'm just going to ask you to oppose this particular amendment. And Representative Kiefer, let me just offer you this. If Health East doesn't deliver on its promise in a timely fashion and get you that machine, you come to me and I'll carry the bill for you.
Representative Kiefer.
Mr. Speaker, I do appreciate that, Rep. Norton, and I do trust you. I've enjoyed working with you. However, I see what happened last year when I thought we had an agreement here, and it's changing. So I would actually prefer to get the language where Rep. Ward and Schoen and other Washington County representatives could be okay with this, and we could actually get this in, and we don't have to waste time on the floor again next session dealing with this issue. Mr. Speaker, I'd be happy to, should we put this offline for a minute, or anyone have some language they want to offer to change it? Must be under construction by December 1st of 2013.
Representative Kiefer, we'd have to suspend the rules to do that. That would take 90 votes because it's an amendment to amendment that didn't meet the deadline.
Okay, so we'll just go with the amendment as is, and then if this needs to get fine-tuned later, I'll work with Rep. Norton. I'd still ask for a green vote on this.
Representative Dean.
Mr. Speaker, point of parliamentary inquiry.
State your point of parliamentary inquiry.
Under the current rules, Mr. Speaker, if Representative Kiefer were to withdraw her amendment, could she again have it reauthored or have it re-entered if there had needed to be an agreement offline, or what did our current rules say with regard to withdrawing an amendment and reintroducing amendment?
Representative, point of parliamentary inquiry. So she could withdraw her amendment and reoffer the same amendment. To reoffer an amended amendment, we'd have to suspend the rules to do that.
Mr. Speaker, point of parliamentary inquiry.
State your point of parliamentary inquiry.
Mr. Speaker, would it be possible to, under the current rules and custom and usage, to have a slight modification to an existing or to an amendment and have that reauthored and and brought before the body, and would you have an assurance that it would be brought back?
Representative Dean, the rule that we're talking about is 3.33. And there is language in 3.33E that I would refer you to, Representative Dean, about technical or conforming changes to pre-filed amendments. Representative Kiefer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just want to point out that actually the date August 1st wasn't just pulled out of the air. It was in the original bill from last year that passed 132 to 1. So I'm not asking to make a major change that Health East and Woodwinds and MRO didn't already know about and didn't already plan for. So, these one-offs, what if there's an earthquake? This is a contract, it's a bill that we passed. If that really does happen, then I would say, okay, let's do a special thing next session. But I think for this one, I don't think we should do the what if this, what if that. I think we should just keep to the original agreement and make sure that the bed is put into Woodbury in a timely fashion. Thank you.
Seeing no further discussion, the clerk will take the roll on the amendment. The clerk will close the roll. Representative Murphy votes no. There being 46 ayes and 85 nays, the motion does not prevail. The amendment is not adopted. There's another amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Huntley moving to amend House File 164, the first engrossment as follows. The amendment is coded 368.
Representative Huntley.
Mr. Speaker and members, this is a pretty simple amendment. When this fight between these two groups started, it was because one of the groups put up a facility that was not attached to a hospital. Personally, I visited that one, and if I needed this kind of treatment, I'd prefer not to go to a hospital. All the arguments we've heard over the years is that if they do these outside of a hospital, that the hospital's going to lose money. Well, folks, we don't know what the agreement is between the hospital and these facilities that are within the hospital. We don't know because no one has ever told us. And in committee, they refused to respond. In 2007, I sent a letter to MRO and one of the hospitals where they had a facility asking them what was the financial arrangement between MRO and the hospital. That was in 2007. I have not got a letter back yet. So what this amendment does simply says that if there's a radiation facility in a hospital, they have to report to the Commissioner of Health what their financial arrangement is between the owner of the facility and the hospital. Pretty simple. All it does is get us some information. It doesn't cost us any money. I urge your support.
Representative Norton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. It's not often I like to stand here and disagree with the chair of the Health and Human Service Finance Committee, and generally on these issues we find ourselves in agreement, but this time we don't. I would just ask members, this amendment isn't necessary. The department can get this information if they need it, and in fact, if it had been so important, it's really too bad it didn't get included in the study that we just had the department do. I think for right now we don't need to have another requirement added to this bill, and I just ask members to vote no, send a clean bill to conference committee. Thank you very much.
Seeing no further discussion on the amendment, all in favor of the amendment say aye. Aye. All opposed, no. No. The motion does not prevail. The amendment is not adopted. The clerk will give the bill its third reading.
Third reading, House File 164.
Third reading. Discussion. Representative Huntley.
Members, you need to know about this procedure that these facilities do. It is a procedure that is never, ever overutilized. Unlike ordering an X-ray or a CAT scan where you can order too many of them and you shouldn't have done it, this particular procedure is never overutilized. Any physician that did this procedure to a patient that did need it would lose his license. So we're sitting here trying to regulate the number of these facilities and where they're located. As I said earlier, I would prefer not to have to go to a hospital to have this kind of treatment. And I don't think it's in our interest to regulate the number of these and where they are located. If a group thinks they can't make money because there's not enough need for it, they won't build one. If they think they can outcompete somebody else, they will build it and let them compete.
Representative Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, members, for your time here today. I appreciate Representative Zeller's handing out the document that we have here today from a fellow who now is one of our Supreme Court justices, David Lillehog. And I think it's very key to look at this document and realize that we're not ending the debate here today. Instead, what we're doing is we're throwing it into the courts. And there's 2 points that he made in this document showing that this has huge potential for being unconstitutional. In fact, if you read the document, it says this unusual statute is of dubious constitutionality, and the proposed lengthy extension of the moratorium makes it even more likely that a court would declare the statute unconstitutional. And members, while it's battled in potentially the courts and elsewhere here in the legislature, as we kind of use this as a volleyball court, it seems like what's happening is people aren't getting care close to home. And that's disturbing to me, because I hope that none of us have to have a loved one that needs this treatment. I hope that none of your children, none of your parents, none of your spouses have to have this treatment and find themselves having to travel distances, whether you may consider those distances long or short, that they never have to experience that and have a loved one have to go to a strange facility that they're not familiar with that's outside of their community. Because as we all know, cancer is a horrible, horrible disease that I hope none of you have to experience and have to go through that. I happen to have a health campus within my community that because of this moratorium, we would not be able to have cancer treatment placed in that facility. And that's unfortunate, because instead of having people come to their own community, they're going to have to travel outside of that. And I think anybody that has to suffer through this horrible disease should not be required to go any further than what the market can provide them. So I'd ask that you vote no on this bill.
Representative Woodard.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'll be really brief in my comments, but both sides of this issue understand that cancer is a terrible thing. We've all been touched in our lives from friends and family who have suffered from cancer. So the question is not whether or not this is better treatment for cancer patients, in my opinion. One of the things that when I first looked at this issue 2 years ago when I came to St. Paul, for me it was pretty clear that this was a free market issue until I really delved into it. And I'll tell you, Representative Gruenhagen made some good comments a little bit earlier about the fact that I wish too that this was a more free market system that we have in our medical system, but it's not. At the end of the day, our hospitals in this state are going to go through really tumultuous change over the next few years between Obamacare, the Affordable Care Act, changes that are being made throughout this state and throughout this country. They need some stability. I encourage you to please vote green on this bill. Give our hospitals some stability here, a little bit of a safe harbor from some of the changes and new regulations that are coming their way, new costs that are coming their way. And let's vote green on this. Let's help out our hospitals. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Dean.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. I would respectfully speak against the Norton bill and urge members to vote no. For many of the reasons that were brought forward before with the study, with the increases in cancer that we are going to be seeing over the next 10 years, a 25% increase in cancer in the state of Minnesota. And as good as our doctors and nurses are in treating that, sadly, we're going to have lots and lots of folks suffering through the treatment of cancer. And as Representative Huntley, Chairman Huntley very aptly put, nobody is choosing to have chemotherapy, nobody is choosing to have radiation therapy, nobody is choosing to have cancer. This is not liposuction, this is not facial, this is not a facelift. This is very difficult surgery. Under the best of circumstances with the best care is really not something that you would want your loved one to have to go through. It can be painful. The side effects can make you very, very sick afterwards, and it's very difficult to deal with. These facilities offer patients a choice for some coordinated care that I believe is better care from what I've seen from my own personal family, from family members dealing with cancer and dealing with the therapy that is involved, the choices, the coordination of care, I think is superior. If it were my kids, if it was for me, I would choose that as my care. And I would want my constituents to have that choice as well. And I don't like it when this body decides who gets care and who doesn't get care and when they get that care. I think that that's a bad precedent to set. Representative Huntley really hit the nail on the head when he said this should be about cancer patients and about their ability to get the care that they need. One of the things that I think was not brought up in the bill that is really worth being put forward is that this doesn't say that we're not going to limit the amount of technology and dollars that are put into these expensive machines. We're just saying we're going to say where those new dollars and expensive machines go. And the growth will take place within these hospitals rather than across the parking lot in a facility that might be coordinated care, might be better care. If you're a patient, what difference does it make to you? What the difference is what's the best care, what's the least amount of hassle when I'm dealing with my wife or my husband or my kid, dealing with the sickness, dealing with the side effects, getting in, getting out, getting coordinated care. What's the best care? And I think that what we've said is that we want to offer those folks a choice. And when we put these moratoria down, I think that that offers Minnesotans the wrong signal. We want to offer more choices, not less. We want to offer better care for Minnesota patients and their families who are struggling through a tough time. So I'd very, very strongly urge a no vote and respectfully do so. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Zellers.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and members for the debate. As many have said, I don't think it'll be our last one on this issue. But Representative Dean hit it right on the head. Actually, and Representative Huntley as well. Nobody wants to go to these facilities. Nobody wants to be there. I hope I'm never there. But based on the history I gave you with my grandma and grandpa, it's something that is top of mind for me, for my wife. She wants to make sure. I'm over 40 now, and apparently there's some stuff starts to go bad after that. I don't know. You guys will probably let us know. But you too, Mr. Speaker, careful. The stress of the job will do it more than that. But it's something that nobody ever wants to have to go through. And this is yes, healthcare is about numbers. It's about coverage. It's about capacity. It's about the number of facilities, the location. But again, for Billy, you have the entire University of Minnesota Med School in there during his treatment. He could care less. But for the people like my grandma who never got to enjoy retirement, never got to enjoy her children, her grandchildren, the one occasion that she went in, it was uncomfortable. It wasn't what she wanted. It wasn't what made her feel safe and made her feel comfortable in the situation she's in. And if you can't stand for the Constitution, for the free market and God, then at least stand by the deal. this is something that we talked about last year. This was something that we talked about for 10 years. It's not just a funding formula for transportation or education. It's something that a lot of people, and you hear by the speeches on the House floor today, bring a lot of passion to this issue. It's something that when you go through it as a family is a very emotional and draining situation for everyone involved. So I'm pretty sure I know how the vote's going to go, and Representative Norton, although I appreciate your passion on it, it's a little doesn't quite have the same authority because it doesn't affect you. It's not for your area, it's for our area. And Representative Keith for making a very valid point on her bill to not have the support for something that was also a part of an agreement or deal or a part of what we had talked about, I also think was not a fair accounting for her here today. So I don't believe it's the right vote to vote for this bill. I ask members not to vote for it, but I'm also very realistic to know that some of the amendments didn't go exactly the way that we had expected. So I'm pretty sure that this vote won't go the right way. But when it does come back, members, please keep an open mind, because this is about an unfortunate situation that none of us wants to be in. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, members.
Representative Hamilton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. And this could affect you. It could affect every single person in this room. Our hospitals are mandated to make sure that they cover care on anybody who walks through the emergency room door, whether it's a common cold or for cancer treatment. They're mandated to make sure that they're strong and ready for any epidemic that may happen across the state of Minnesota. It could affect every single one of you. Now, one thing that we haven't talked about, that was brought up about, why do we do this? Why aren't we going after dialysis or anything like that? Well, let's talk about the profitability. The harsh reality, if you will, are that these centers are profitable. There's a reason why they've chose this to build outside of the hospitals. There's also doctor referrals where, correct me if I'm wrong, the doctor that works at the hospital could have ownership in one of these right across the street. So the doctor could refer their patient across the street to this clinic to get their treatment. These things are profitable. And so they take the profits away from the hospital, a hospital that's also mandated to provide coverage to anybody, everybody, that walks through that emergency room door. And rightfully so, in my opinion, right? We are a wealthy nation, we are a civilized nation, and we should provide that care. But again, talk about the profitability. Let's don't dance around that. There's a reason people are building these. And I am not questioning the quality of care. I'm not going there, because the people on all sides of this issue, the doctors on all sides of this issue, they're good doctors, I believe. That's not the issue. The issue is keeping our hospitals strong so that they can provide the care that they're mandated to provide, and that they can be prepared for any epidemic or anything that comes along. It affects every single one of us, even out in rural Minnesota. Thank you.
Representative Norton.
Thank you, members. I've really enjoyed the discussion. I think it's one we need to have. Even when we disagree, we need to air our differences, and that's what we've done here today. I'm going to urge your support for this bill. And there have been some stories that have been told. I carried this bill when I was approached because of personal experiences, not me, but my mother. I lost my mother the year before I was elected here to office. I watched her go through treatment. I drove home every weekend to Nebraska to spend time with her. So I know personally what that feels like. For some of the rest of you who are in committee, you know that my campaign manager, who is my age, Nancy, died of cancer just a year or so ago, just around her 54th birthday. And I know what she went through for about 4.5 years. I watched her go in to take her radiation treatments. I know how hard and painful it was. I know what a wonderful job the hospital in my area did for her. But I also know that when she needed care at the end of her life, when she was trying something new and different, she drove to Cedar Rapids, Iowa. People with cancer, we want them close to home. We want them to get treatment. But the fact is, people who have cancer are going to go where they get the care that they need. In the Twin Cities area, there's care all over the place. In rural Minnesota, there isn't. So when some of you question why am I carrying this bill, it may not be because I live in the Twin Cities area and it affects me on a day-to-day basis, but it's because this issue is very important and I want the very best care for cancer patients in the state of Minnesota. I want to thank Representative Hamilton for speaking because he made many of the points that I was going to make in my closing statements, and I'm not going to repeat them. He did a really nice job and I really appreciate him doing that. But I do want to touch on something Representative Huntley said, and that was talking about this is a service that isn't overutilized. That's absolutely true. And in fact, that's the crux of part of the problem that we have here. When you have facilities like this that can't be overutilized, you don't need more than you need. You only need a finite amount of them. When you build more of them, it's all you do is hurt the ones that are in existence today. And right now, those are our hospitals. And when you have for-profit competitive a market across the street pulling patients away from a finite use facility that's quite expensive, that is heavily regulated by the state of Minnesota, by the way, and is poorly paid by the state of Minnesota for many of the patients that go to that hospital, we have an unfair playing field. That's why I'm carrying the bill. That's why I ask for your support today. Let's put this bill to rest for a few years, hopefully out till 2020. Let's keep an eye on it. Let's ask the department. They know. We've talked to them. They know this is something they need to watch. In their own report, they said they needed to keep an eye on it, and I'm assured that they will, or if not, you'll remind them. But let's vote for this bill today, and I thank you for your time.
Seeing no further discussion, the clerk will take the roll on the bill. The clerk will close the roll. There being 102 ayes and 28 nays, the bill is passed and its title agreed to. The next bill on the calendar for the day is House File 607. The clerk will report the bill.
House File 607, number 1 on the calendar for today, the first engrossment, an act relating to health.
Representative Morgan, to your bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, House File 607 is a bill relating to the optometrist scope of practice. Before I get started, I want to thank Representative Barrett for his work on the bill last session. The bill enables optometrists to be reimbursed by private health plans for certain services they currently provide. These services include using autorefractors or other automated testing devices, diagnosing diseases of the visual system and accessory or subordinate anatomical parts, prescribing plano or cosmetic contact lenses, and employing ocular exercises, orthoptics, or therapeutic vision care. There were some concerns about the bill initially from the Minnesota Academy of Ophthalmology, but apparently the ophthalmologists and the optometrists have gotten together. They are in agreement, and they now see eye to eye. Thank you. Thank you very little. The bill is also supported by the Minnesota Occupational Therapy Association and the Minnesota Council of Health Plans. Mr. Speaker, I urge members to support the bill.
There are no amendments at the desk. The clerk will give the bill its third reading.
Third reading, House File 607.
Third reading. Any further discussion to the bill? Seeing none, the clerk will take the roll on the bill. The clerk will close the roll. Benson votes aye. Benson M votes aye. There being 128 ayes and 0 nays, the bill is passed and its title agreed to. There's another, the clerk will report the next bill on the calendar for the day, which is House File 75. Representative Holberg.
Point of personal privilege.
State your point of personal privilege.
Members, as a member of the subcommittee on Legislative Auditor Selection Committee for topic selection, I'd like to remind you that your forms are due tomorrow. This is the second form that we've asked to fill out. Representative Hansen was also on the committee with us. We're asking that if you'd like to fill them out, we both have extra forms on the floor, and that you submit them today because tomorrow's your last day, and do them before you go home.
The clerk will report the bill.
House File 75, number 2 on the calendar for today, the first engrossment, an act relating to health.
The author of the bill, Representative Schoen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is a bill related to community paramedics. I have to thank Representative Mack for all the heavy lifting that she did on this bill for the last couple of years. This is simply a cleanup bill. We just overlooked putting in 12 hours of continuing education related to this bill. This was just a simple oversight by everybody that was working on it, and we just fixing what we normally fix on a yearly basis. This bill is no controversy, and I do believe that if June and Ward Cleaver were still on the air, they would endorse this bill as well. I urge a green vote.
There being no amendments at the desk, the clerk will give the bill its third reading.
Third reading, House File 75.
Third reading. Any further discussion? Seeing no further discussion, the clerk will take the roll on the bill. The clerk will close the roll. Franzen changes their vote from no to aye. There being 129 ayes and 1 no, the bill is passed and its title agreed to. Reports from the Committee on Rules and Legislative Administration.
Report from the Committee on Rules and Legislative Administration. Murphy E. from the Committee on Rules, pursuant to Rules 121 and 333, designates the following bills to be placed on the calendar for today for Monday, April 8th, 2013. House File numbers 527, 194, 290, 1587, 648, and 129.
Motions and resolutions. They're a copy of the non-controversial motions at the House desk and online. If there's no objection, we'll take action on those motions first. Hearing no objection, those motions prevail.
Schoen moves that House File 1002, now on the General Register, be re-referred to the Committee on Health and Human Services Finance.
Representative Schoen.
Mr. Speaker, members, this is a bill that was so great, it was moving so fast, we overflew Health and Human Services Finance. We just need to get it back there, and I've talked to Representative Huntley, and he's all good with that. I'd appreciate your support.
Any discussion? Seeing no discussion, all those in favor of the motion say aye. All opposed, no. Motion prevails.
Winkler moves that House File 92, now on the General Register, be re-referred to the Committee on Ways and Means.
Representative Winkler.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, House File 92 has a tiny little fiscal note, so we're going to send it back to Ways and Means and leave no decimal point behind.
Seeing no further discussion on the motion, all in favor say aye. All opposed, no. Motion prevails.
Fisher moves that House File 1020 be recalled from the Committee on Education Finance and re-referred to the Committee on Health and Human Services Finance.
Representative Fisher.
Thank you. I've talked to chairs of both committees. It was clerical error that had occurred during committee. Originally, it was supposed to. The motion had been to send it to Committee on Health and Human Services Finance, and there was a clerical error that sent it the wrong way.
Seeing no discussion, Representative Nelson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And yeah, what Representative Fisher is right. If you went on the tape, we clearly moved it to the right place, but a clerical error, and when it was filed, that it went the wrong place.
Seeing no further discussion, all in favor of the motion say aye. All opposed, no. Motion prevails.
Khan moves that House File 1389, now in the General Register, be re-referred to the Committee on Ways and Means.
Representative Khan.
This is a bill that we thought was a technical bill dealing with MMB. It turns out there are some fiscal impacts.
Seeing no further discussion, all in favor of the motion say aye. All opposed, no. Motion prevails. Announcements. Representative Abler.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. I'd like to have you celebrate with me. The expectations of the Twins are not high, but I just wanted to point out I wore the jersey today, and they are 2-1. They're a .667, a game above 500. The last time they were at this point was September of 2010. So last night Escobar had a walk-off double, and today they scored 5 runs in the 8th inning. So the next stop got to be the playoffs. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Murphy.
State Government, Finance, and Veterans Affairs Committee will meet at 5:15 in room 200.
Representative Lincheski.
The Tax Committee will resume at 5:15 in room 10.
Any other announcements? Representative Murphy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. I move that when the House adjourns today, it adjourns until 3 p.m., Monday, April 8th, 2013.
Representative Murphy moves that when the House adjourn today, it'll adjourn until 3 p.m. Monday, April 8th, 2013. All in favor say aye. All opposed, no. Motion prevails. Representative Murphy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that the House do now adjourn. Go Twins.
Representative Murphy moves that the House do now adjourn. All in favor say aye. All opposed, no. The motion prevails. The House stands adjourned until 3 p.m. Monday, April 8th, 2013.